I'm going to tell you about something that happened 23 years ago during the LA riots. But it's relevant today because it could have happened, say, a month ago in Ferguson, Missouri, or last week in Baltimore, Maryland. And I'm going to tell this story the way like an outdoor hunting magazine or fishing magazine does, and that is by starting with kind of an exciting moment and then flashing back, all right? So it starts with Mike Chow, the photographer behind me, and a reporter named Ben Winton and I were at the at the Phoenix Gazette at the time, which later merged with the Arizona Republic. Yeah, Phoenix Gazette. And Rodney King, a black man in South Central Los Angeles, got pursued by police officers, pulled over, and beaten senseless. And this was one of the first times where somebody just happened to have a video camera and capture it all. And it was a terrible event, just stirred up tremendous outrage. And there was a trial in Los Angeles, and 4 police officers responsible for beating Rodney King all got acquitted. That was on April 29th, 1992. That day, LA blew up, just blew up with a huge riot all over the place. And we were here in Arizona. And at the time, the Gazette and the Arizona Republic viewed themselves as regional newspapers and covered news all over the Southwest. So Mike Chow and I and Ben Winton were assigned to go to Los Angeles and cover the riots. And we were, I can remember flying into LA and seeing at dawn on the next day, April 30th, and seeing the streets just absolutely empty, but smoke curling up from buildings everywhere. I mean, just there's fires everywhere, but most of them are kind of out. And we got to the airport and we tried to figure out what we're going to do next, and we didn't think renting a car was a good idea because we weren't familiar with the place. So we started looking for cabbies, and I think we hit 4, 5, 6 cabbies before we found one, and we said, we'll pay you a lot of money, take us into the riot zone. And this was a Middle Eastern dude, and he was like, sure, let's go for it. So we took off into the riot zone, and it was just eerily quiet. There were no rioters on the street. It was still 6 or 7 in the morning. There were people out sweeping glass and boarding up buildings and telling us, beware, this is a dangerous place. And when I say people, I'm talking, we're in the African-American section of South Central LA. So there's almost no white presence there except for me. And Mike is Asian, Ben Winton was an American Indian, and we had a Middle Eastern cabbie. So we're like the United Nations driving down the street. And I just remember that as the morning progressed, it started getting a little bit more perilous. You started seeing groups on street corners just milling about, and then you'd see a little looting going on. There was a gas station, and all of a sudden it caught fire, and there were people jumping up and down on cars and looting the gas station, and it was getting pretty scary. And I kept thinking, how far do we go? How much risk do we take? And it became the theme of the day for me, and Mike didn't care because he wanted his pictures and he didn't give a damn. And so the rioting was starting to pick up, and it was around noon, and all of a sudden the cabbie stopped next to a golf course, pulled a brown paper bag out from beneath his cab, and we got fires going up, looters around us and stuff like that. He says, it's my lunchtime, I'm taking the lunch break. It was one of the more bizarre 20 minutes I ever spent in my life. This guy eating falafels and rioting all around us. And then it's time to go on. So we start driving around, and we come to a store, and I think it was a sporting goods store, but I'm not sure, but it was on fire, and there were looters piling out the doors of the store. And Mike wanted to stop and get pictures. So the cabbie stopped, and Mike got out at this street corner, and he gets out, and I'm thinking, I should have Mike's back, because there's rioters literally on all 4 corners around us too. And I'm pretty nervous, and he's shooting his pictures, and out of nowhere, I didn't even see, these two giant guys the size of football players. One of them pushes me aside, and the other one reaches into the cab and grabs Ben and says, "We're taking this cab." And they jump in the cab, and I can hear him threaten the cabbie's life. "Driver, we're going to kill you." And the cabbie doesn't know what to do. They shut the door. And he starts driving down the street. I'm looking around, there's rioters everywhere. Some of them are now giving us mad dog looks, threatening looks, and yelling at us. And we're standing there, and I'm thinking this is the end. And the cabbie all of a sudden stops. He gets out of the cab, he holds up the keys in the air, and he starts yelling, "I go no further, I go no further," like that. And this big, huge dude comes right up to me, and I think, oh, but this is really bad. He gets right in my face, and he whispers, "If you guys want to live, get your asses into that cab right now, and I'll walk with you." So I turned to Mike and I go, "Let's go." And then, as we were doing that, the two guys who had carjacked us got out of the cab and walked away. And so we jump in the cab, and the cabbie takes off. And we survived that incident, and it was really kind of interesting that amid all of the mayhem, we knew that Reginald Denny, a white truck driver, had been killed the day before, dragged from a vehicle and killed at the corner of Florence and Normandy. We knew this was a perilous place. There were a lot of deaths out there. And so to have our life saved by this black guy who I just thought was coming to get me kind of was really impressive. And to have this Middle Eastern cab driver who, I don't know whether he's Iraqi or Iranian, I still can't recall. But either way, it was just unbelievably courageous for him to stop there instead of to go on. We thought it was time to take a break. So we knew there was a police command post a couple miles away. We told the cabbie, "Hey, why don't we go over there? It might be safe." And I want to mention that there's no police presence on the streets anywhere. There is no fire department presence on the streets anywhere. And now there is looting everywhere. And there are fires burning everywhere. And there is chaos everywhere. It's anarchy. So we go to the command post. The reason there are no cops or firefighters on the streets is because they're all at the command post. Every single one of them. Nobody's out protecting the city. They're there. They're hunkered down. And so we stay there. I don't remember if we were there an hour or something like that. And we start going, "What are we doing here? This is crazy." So Mike says, "I know. We could go out into the local area, walk out there, because we left the cabbie behind, and we can take some pictures. We can talk to some people." We didn't get more than a block and a half from the place, and I'm walking along the sidewalk with a cement wall next to me, and I didn't even see where it came from, but a beer bottle goes flying by, just misses my head, hits the wall, and explodes against the wall. I look across the street. There are 4 or 5 guys, and they start yelling at us. And I'm thinking, time to retreat. At that very moment, at the time, rioters were going throughout Los Angeles in caravans of vehicles, many people in a car, and jumping out and looting places. All of a sudden, a caravan of 3 or 4 cars stops in front of a market, a Korean market down the street. A bunch of these rioters jump out of the car, run into the market, and all of a sudden, bam, 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 gunshots are going off. And Mike's taking pictures, and I'm just like spinning. And a woman runs out, an African-American woman runs out, comes running down the street. As she goes by us, she screams out, "They just shot Johnny Kim. They just shot Johnny Kim." And Mike says, "I think we need to get in a little closer to this." Sorry to use you, dude, but... And so I grabbed him by the collar and I said, "That's it, man. We're going back to the police party." And we headed back there. This was kind of weird irony. We had lunch at an African-American barbecue joint. I can't remember the name, but I would recommend it highly. And the proprietor was a young woman, and she said she was about to go off shift or something, and we said we really needed to file our stories. We were going to go to the airport. So she said, and we asked if she would take us to the airport. And she said, had a little VW bug, and she says, "Yes, I'll do it, but you can't have your heads above the window levels." So we got in our Volkswagen, and we all hunkered down beneath the thing and went to the airport, filed our stories, and then thought, now what do we do? And how many of you know what we did? We hired another cabbie to take us into the riot zone. So back we go, and now the place is just crazy. There are fires and everything's just nutso, and it's pretty spooky. And I'm still the lone white dude around. Although, anyhow, at one point, I'll never forget this. There was a shopping center on our left filled with loaders, people running outside with TV sets and all kinds of stuff. And this, all of a sudden, finally police presence. A whole parade of police cars and fire trucks comes down the street with sirens going and lights flashing. They see all the looters over there. They pull into the parking lot. I think, finally, law and order. They cruise right through the parking lot, right on by. And the looters scattered, and as soon as they were gone, they all came back out and said, oh, everything was gone. Now there are Korean businessmen. We're seeing them on top of buildings and in front of their stores with rifles. It's because they're trying to protect their properties. It's nutso. And we get to a corner, and I'm not positive what intersection was, but I believe it was Florence and Normandy, the same intersection where Reginald Denny had been attacked the day before. And we are sitting there at a red light, and that's part of the strangeness. It's a red light, and people are obeying the law. All this traffic stopped there, and all of a sudden, straight across the intersection from us, I see a bunch of guys jump out of a car, and they go to the truck that's at the front of the traffic line there. And they have a club, the steering wheel locking device, and one of them smashes the side window, and they reach in and they grab the guy inside. It's a white truck driver. They pull him out of the truck. They beat him to the ground, they kick him, they beat him some more, and it's just terrifying. And I'm going through a moment that journalists in war zones must go through every day, and that is, I should help this guy. We should do something about this. But if we do something about this, are we doing our jobs isn't the biggest question. Are we going to get killed and make it pointless? And also, are we doing our jobs? Because that's not our job to do something. Our job is to monitor and observe and write about it. I was saved, I think, in a sense, having to do anything, because about that moment, a beer bottle hit the back of our car, because the car behind us was full of rioters, and they detected us. And they started screaming obscenities and threatening us. At that moment, the guys who were beating the driver got back in their car. The light changed. They took off, screeching down the street, and ran over the guy's head. The guys behind us are now screaming, and we're yelling at our cabbie, go, 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 go. We take off down the street, and we are flying, and we are being chased at 60, 65, I don't know how fast we're going, really fast, down the city streets of LA, through lights, through stop signs, not stopping. Beer bottles bouncing off of our vehicle. And we get to the airport, and they stop chasing us somewhere along the way, I don't know where. And we file our stories, and for reasons that I still to this day don't understand, but I think it's because our editors sensed the combination of terror and I don't know what else in our voices. They ordered us, we didn't actually file the stories. We gave in a report over the phone, and they told us, we want you to fly back right now. It's probably 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. We want you to fly back to Phoenix right now and file the stories here. So that's what we did. And it wasn't the end of the story, because I wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened during this riot, to put it into context. There were 58 deaths, 2,000 injuries, 3,600 fires, $1 billion in damage, and there was one changed man, me. I never looked at things quite the same way after that. I remember when I got home the next day, Rodney King was on TV, and he said, can't we all just get along? And I was watching the TV with my wife who's here, Linda, and with my son, 9 years old at the time. And it was like spontaneous combustion. I just broke down weeping, and I couldn't even figure out why. But after I thought about it, it was because I had been confronted with an understanding of human nature that I didn't want to believe in, which was the evil of human nature. But I'd also been confronted with the good of human nature. The guy who got run over and everything, I thought he was dead. We all thought he was dead. It turns out he lived, and I actually tracked him down and interviewed him. His name was Jim Greer. And Jim, I talked to him months later. I interviewed him twice, and months later, he had developed a great deal of hate. Hate for the people who did what they did to him. And he even used the N-word, but he emphasized he wasn't talking about blacks, not about African Americans, but about people that did this to him. And I wasn't sure if that was a real distinction or not in his mind, but I kind of understood where he was coming from. And I thought, but Jim, you were saved. You were rescued from the street by blacks who took you to the hospital, African Americans. And your wallet was left on the curb. I found out about this later. And it was picked up by a grandmother and granddaughter, and they found a way to get your wallet back to you when you were in the emergency room at the hospital. So I learned a lot about human nature. And I also learned to look at everything differently and not to look at the rioters or the cops who attacked Rodney or hit Rodney King in a vacuum or in a single frame photo. It was about, as a reporter, my job is not to just tell what happened. My job is to understand why it happened. And these things happen for a reason. In 1992, they happened for a reason. And hopefully, as a journalist, we can help people to learn from those things. But we haven't done a very damn good job. Because now, in 2014 and 2015, we have the same things happening again. And I guess we're going to have to get better at writing the stories and maybe explaining the why so that people can not only read it, see it, but have an empathy with it. Appreciate what it means to them. So thank you guys very much.